In this video, we will build a full-stack CRUD application using the new React Router version 7 framework integrated with Supabase. We'll set up dynamic routes and data loaders to handle creating, reading, updating, and deleting items. You'll learn everything you need to know in order to start using React Router as a framework, and by the end of this tutorial, you'll understand how to create your next application using React Router version 7. Before we get into the video, if you could leave a like and subscribe, I would massively appreciate it, and let's get into the video. Okay everyone, let's get started. I opened up here a folder inside of my VS Code, and we want to create our React Router version 7 application. Now, in order to create an application using React Router as a framework, you can use the command npx create react router at latest. You'll see that if you have never used this command before, it will ask you to install it, but I have. You can see that this is the version of Create React Router I'm using. It's going to ask us where we want to create the project. I want to just make it inside of the folder that I'm currently in, so I'll just put a dot. Then it's going to ask us if we want to initialize a new Git repository. I'm going to put yes because I want you guys to have access to the code. And then it's going to ask if we want to install all the dependencies with npm. I'm going to press yes. Perfect. Now, if I want to run this, I just run npm run dev. And we should see that the project should start on the localhost 5173 because this is indeed a Vite app as well. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to run the app. And this is what the boilerplate React Router v7 project starts with. Now let's go back over here. We're aiming to build a CRUD in this project. So we're going to be building a website where we have kind of like a to-do list application. And this is just a simple application to get you guys going with the React Router library. So we also want to use some way to execute those operations, right? And in this case, we're using Supabase. Now, Supabase is similar to Firebase. It's super simple to use. You guys will see you don't have to spend a lot of time understanding it. I do have a video on Supabase if you're interested in that, but for the purposes of this video, we're going to just be using it as a way for us to store information into a database and make API requests. So I need you to create your own Supabase account. I'm already logged into mine, and you should be on a page like this. So in order to start this, we want to just create our new project in Supabase just to set this up before we actually get started with the React Router stuff. We're just going to give it a name. We're going to call it React Router CRUD. And it's going to ask for a password for the database. I'm just going to generate a password, and I'm going to click on Create New Project. Then when this is generated, we'll wait for it to finish setting up the project, and I'll be back in a second. Perfect. As you can see, we finished generating the project, and now we have the API keys we can use to actually connect this to our project. So I'm going to go back over here to the code, and in a React Router v7 project, it is created using Vite, as you can see over here, and with the create React Router command, it actually already installs React Router as a plugin, Tailwind CSS, and TS config paths. React Router version 7 has a very big emphasis on TypeScript and general emphasis on routing as well. It has a very specific way of doing things. So we first want to just create the client for our Supabase app before we create any of the routes. We'll just come over here and say Supabase client.ts, and inside of here I want to install the Supabase JS library. So I'm going to run npm install at Supabase/Supabase JS, and this should be good to go. Now up here I want to import the create client function from at Supabase/Supabase.js. Inside of here, I want to create two variables. One is going to be the Supabase URL, and one is going to be the Supabase anon key. Now we can get both of them directly from this part over here, from the project API. I'm going to copy the URL and I'll paste it over here. And I'm going to copy this API key and I'm going to paste it over here. Now, I would recommend if you're building an actual big project to make them into environment variables. I'm going to end up doing that before I publish this to my GitHub, just so that people don't have access to your Supabase keys. Now down here, I want to export const Supabase equal to create client, and this create client allows us to pass both the Supabase URL and the Supabase anonymous key. Perfect. Now we can close this up and actually get started with our React Router project. Now you should see that right off the bat, React Router comes with this app folder over here, which is where most of your project is going to exist inside of. And it comes with 2 different folders to start and a couple files. So the app.css, as you might know, it's the CSS file, which already comes embedded with Tailwind in its newest version. So I don't really want to deal with that, even though I will have some styling in the project. I'm not gonna focus on the styling. This video is purely for functionality. But then we have the root.tsx. Now this root.tsx is really cool because this is a special file that comes with a React Router version 7 project. It basically includes a couple components inside of it. Most importantly, it includes a layout component, it includes an app component, and it includes an error boundary. So I'll explain to you what each of them are. So in the layout component, here's where we define the HTML of our website. So if you're familiar with React, you know that in React as a whole, you have some HTML and you have a div which you inject some JavaScript inside of it when your page loads. With React Router, this HTML exists like this. We have a component that we can create to inject meta information, so metadata information. We also have this component that is for any links that we want to add, such as the ones over here. We also have this too that I don't think you should worry about at all. And we then also render the children inside of the body. So this over here is just the HTML structuring our app, but our app will entirely consist of the children that is rendered over here. Now, what is this children? Well, the children is the app component. This app component right now only returns one thing, and it's the outlet. Now, the outlet just means that it will return whatever UI we put on the routes that we define. We haven't defined any routes yet, even though it comes already with one route, which is this home.tsx page over here. But I'll get to how we can define routes in a second. In order to actually define a route, not only we need to have a file in this folder, but we also have this special routes.ts file. Now this file is super special because this is the only way you can define a route in React Router version 7. For example, I'm going to delete the route that we already have here, and I will delete this welcome folder as well, which just had some some basic components. And let's start from scratch. Our project right now will break, we'll have an error because we don't have any routes. Now to define a route, most importantly, to define the index route of your project, so the routes are the component that will render when you are in this empty slash part of the URL, you use this function called index. So index over here will define where the component that will represent the index route will exist. Now that component should be inside of the routes folder, and previously we had it set to home.tsx. However, in this project, we want to actually make kind of like a CRUD where we're going to have a to-do list app or an items app where you're able to add new items to a list, display them, and update and delete them as you go. So in order for us to do that, we'll create a route in our project called the items route, which is basically the home page. All it does is it will just show the list of items that we have in our database. So we've created this file, so now all we have to do is just say that the index route will exist where the items.tsx file exists inside of the routes folder. So we put the path inside of here. Great. Now, if I were to come over here, I can now export default function and export a component called items. And inside of it, I could return some UI. Let's just say items page, just for ease of testing. You'll see that when I come over here, it now shows items page when we are in the home route. Great. Now let's make a new route. For example, let's make the route that allows us to add a new item to our list. We obviously haven't created any of that logic yet, but it's important to lay out the groundwork for the routes before we start the project. So to do that, I'm going to actually duplicate this file, and we're going to change the name of it from items copy to new item. Perfect. I'll also change this to new item, and I'll change this to new items page. Perfect. Now, if I want to define this route in React Router v7, I just have to add a new item to this list that is exported in the routes file. Now, this item over here, we don't use index because index is just for the home route. What we use now is the route function. And this route function allows us to pass two things. The first one is the path to that route, which we can call whatever we want. I'm going to say it's going to be new. And it also allows us to pass the path to the file. So I'm going to pass routes new item.tsx. You'll see that now when I go to the /new page, we should see the UI for that route. Great. Now let's keep this file out of sight for a bit, and let's actually start working on our root.tsx, because we do have two routes, but there's no way to navigate between them. So in the root.tsx, you see that there's this outlet component over here. And we explained that what this does is it basically renders whatever UI or whatever route component is currently being represented depending on the route. So if I were to wrap this around with, I don't know, like a div, we could put some sort of UI that will exist independent of which route we're currently in. So if I were to put here the text Navbar, since it's outside of the outlet, what changes is just the outlet. So if I were to go to the home page, the UI above it stays the same, but the outlet changes the UI. So what this means is I can add a Navbar inside of our project, and I'll put it above this thing. Now, how are we going to do this? Well, I'm going to actually turn this into an empty fragment, and I want to add a nav component, which is going to represent our Navbar. Now, inside of here, I'm going to add the different links that we're going to have in this project. Technically, there's only going to be two links. There's going to be the nav link for the items page, so just the home page. And there's also going to be the one for the new page, right? So new item. Now it's giving us red squiggly lines. By the way, this is a component from React Router, as you can see, nav link. It's giving us red squiggly line because we do have to pass the path in which it will navigate when we call it. So we put a to prop over here, and we say that it will take us to the home path. Now for the new item, we pass the /new route, and it will take us there. You'll see that now we have those both, and we can actually switch between the routes. Now, I also want to add another, like a kind of like a logo to this website. So I'm actually going to add another nav link that would also take us to the homepage, but it will just say something like this. It will say React Router v7 CRUD. That's the name of the website. Now I want to separate it from this nav links over here. I want the top one to be on the left and the bottom ones to be on the right. So I'll do something like this. Now, obviously, there's no UI yet. It all looks super ugly. But as we go ahead, I'm going to be adding the UI for all of the different parts of the page. Now, below this nav, I want to add actually a main tag that will wrap the outlet so we can apply some styling. I could make this a div as well, but I like calling it main just so we can structure this to know that this is the main part of the page. And we'll put some styling to here as well. So now I'm going to add the Tailwind CSS that I want to add to this page, and I'll be back in a second. Okay, everyone. So I just pasted here some styling. If you're not familiar with my style of video, I don't really mind not having styles for videos like this where the focus is just learning how to make a CRUD with React Router. But in case you want to make the website look a little bit better, you can just copy the styling. I'll put together with the code in the description. All I did was I just added some class names to all of the individual elements that we had in the code. And I also added some styling to the body, just like this. And I also removed some of the stuff that was in the app.css. So I removed this just to keep it like this. Perfect. And this is what we get. We get this page. It looks a lot better than what it was before. It looks like an actual website. And I can switch between the different routes. Now, a cool thing that React Router allows us to do with the nav link, and I wanted to show it right off the bat, is it allows us to put some conditional logic on the class name. So for example, I put some class names for the color of the text over here, right, for the nav link. What I can do is I can actually turn this into a function, a callback function that will exist inside of this class name definition. And this allows us to have access to this Boolean called isActive. It also gives us access to stuff like isPending and isTransitioning, and all of this are Booleans that represent the state of the navigation of this link. So isActive will basically tell us, are we in this page? Are we in the page where this link is referring to? Because if it is, then a cool thing we can do is we can actually change the color of it, change the color of the actual link to kind of indicate which page we're in. So I'll copy this, I'll put it over here, and I'll change this to text, I don't know, indigo, to match the other one, and you'll see that, if I go to the items page, this becomes purple. If I go to the news items, it doesn't, because we actually haven't added the same thing there as well. But if I came over here and did this, you should see that now, as we switch pages, it will indicate which one we're in by changing the color. This is something that I think is really cool with the navlink component from React Router. Now we pretty much have the navbar done. Let's get started with the actual code. So we'll go to the items.tsx file over here. So we'll go to the new item.tsx. Now, why do we go to the new item instead of the items? Well, because the items will display the list of items that we add to our database. Now, this new item will allow us to create new items to the database. And how can we see the list of items without any items having been created yet? So let's start with this. Now, to do that, we're going to be using, again, as a backend, we're going to be using Supabase, but you can use any backend you want. It doesn't change. This is just me simplifying us simulating a backend, right? And with Supabase, I want to create a table, and Supabase allows us to create tables and such in PostgreSQL. So I'm going to click on table editor over here. Now we're going to be making a very simple CRUD. So we want to just keep track of items. So each item was going to have a title and some content to it, describing what the item is. So what I want to do is I want to create a new table. We're going to call it items, and we are not going to enable row level security. This video is not a video about Supabase, even though we're using it. So I'm not going to go too much into detail about RLS. If you're interested, again, check out my Supabase video. But then for columns over here, we are going to keep the ones that we have right now. Each item is going to have an ID, and I created that. But we're also going to add a title. And for that title, we're going to be adding a text type. And we won't allow it to be null. We're going to add another column. It's going to be the description, which will also be a text, and it also can't be null. Perfect. Now we're going to accept this. No, we're not going to discard it. We're just going to save this table, and it's going to create the table for us. Now that it has created the table, let's go back to our code. And in this component, we want to have a form which will allow us to enter a title, some content, and click a button to create that item. Now, I think this is important because it will show you guys some of the really cool features that we have access to in React Router. So I'll come over here and let's add an h2 tag, which is going to basically say create new item. Then we want to actually use a component called form. And form is a component from React Router. This form component allows us to put a method, which we're going to say it's a post request. And it also handles all of the form data gathering and stuff directly for us. And you'll see how we'll handle it when we finish creating the UI. Inside of here, I want to put a div. Then I want to put a label, and I'll put the label for the title input. Then below this, I want to put an input that will be of type text, and it will have a name of title, and I'll make it required. Then we'll copy this, we'll add it for the description. We'll change the name to description, and we should be good to go. Now this shouldn't actually be an input, it should actually be a text area. And it shouldn't have a type of text. That doesn't make sense in a text area. And the rest should be okay. Now below this, we'll have a button which will say create item. And this button is of type submit. Perfect. Now if we go to the new item page, you should see that we have the inputs over here, obviously with no UI, but we'll get there in a second. We have the inputs, and what we want is when I click on this create item, I want to make some sort of API request to Supabase to insert this inside of our table. Now in React Router, there is this concept of an action and a loader. A loader is in its essence a way for you to load data to your route or your component. And an action allows you to execute some sort of action based on some form submission. In this case, we want to have an action. More specifically, you can also have a client action and a server action. Now with a server action, we're able to make server. Now with a server action, we can run code that is called only in the server, and we can run, and in the client action, we can run code in the browser. In our case over here, we're gonna use just a server action. So we're going to create this function called action. Now in React Router, the function called action, just like this, is a special function, similar to the loader, because it will, if you export this function, and we'll make it asynchronous as well, Supabase, React Router will know that when you submit this any form inside of this component or route, this action should be executed. So inside of here, we will have access to information about this form. For example, we'll have access to the form data from the form submission. Now we get that through an argument to this function called the request, and we can get that directly from if we come over here and define the type as being action function args. React Router actually gives you really good type definitions even for your routes, so this is pretty good. Inside of here, we can actually access the form data by saying form data is equal to await request dot form data, and to get the title, for example, I can say const title is equal to form data dot get title, and we want to cast this to be a string. Then we'll do the exact same thing for the content. We'll say content over here. No. And we'll do the exact same thing for the description. So we'll say description over here. And now we have access to both of them. We can handle the case in which they weren't sent. For example, if not title or not description, then we can actually return from this action an object with an error. And we can specify the error inside of here by saying something like title and content are required. Something like that. Now below this, we can now actually make the execution of the database call. So we're going to access Supabase by saying const is equal to await Supabase. Now we have access to the client that we created in the beginning of the video. And if you're not familiar with Supabase, it's really easy to insert an item into a table in Supabase. All you have to do is specify what the name of the table is. So in our case, it was items, and call the insert function. Now we'll insert over here an object with the title and the description, which we got from both the form data over here. Now this should return back nothing, but if there's an error, we can access that error and handle it by basically returning it, similar to what we did with the error above. So if there's an error, we'll return an error that will contain the error message from Supabase. Perfect. Now let's test to see if this is working. Actually, I do want to finalize one thing. When we submit this, when you create a new item, you actually want to be redirected to the home page so that they show up over here. Obviously, we haven't run any of that code yet, but if you want to redirect after completing an action in React Router, it's really simple. You just use the redirect function from React Router. You just put the path over here, and it will automatically redirect you to that page. Now let's test this out. We know that our table is completely empty. Now let's test this out. We know that our table is completely empty. There's nothing here. But if we come to our code, to our project, sorry, and I'm going to save this, we can create a new item. Let's put a title here. I'll say something like new item. Actually, let me add a new item. So obviously this is a CRUD and item is very generic. This can be a text management app. It can be a to-do list. It can be an event planning. To be honest, I want to use this as an example to making a website where I can just save video ideas. So for example, I want to save here a list of video ideas that I might want to make. For example, build a weather app, even though I won't make this because I think I've made this in the past. And I'll put a description here, something like use React to build a website that shows weather data. Now, when I click create item, we should see that we got redirected to the homepage. Now, one thing, I know it succeeded because if it didn't succeed, then it wouldn't have reached the redirect statement because it would have failed beforehand. Now, the only way for us to really know if it succeeded is first to come to this table and see that the information that we sent was saved over here. Perfect. Now we learned that we can submit form data in React Router v7 by using actions and forms. Now, one thing I want to talk about as well is metadata. And this is something that is extremely important with React Router and with any website as a whole. We want to insert some metadata into the project. We want to insert meta tags that we want to render in the head of the document when the page loads, because this will help us with SEO. So if we go over here to our root.tsx, remember I mentioned to you guys that there is there's this part of the layout, which is your HTML page, which includes metadata for the document. Now this meta component over here, this right now, it's a component that we don't deal with. It will get all of the metadata that you create through your own components, and you render each individual component, and will aggregate everything through this component. So if you want to insert metadata for a specific page, for example, this page over here, we can do it by adding this meta function at the top. The meta function is like the action function where the name of the function is special. So if we export a function called meta, React Router will know that this will be the function that will define the metadata for this specific route. Now, what kind of metadata can we deal with? Well, you return over here a list, and each individual item of the list will specify a different part of the metadata. For example, I can change the title of this page to something different. For example, right now, the title of the page just says, actually, let me go to new item. It just says localhost 5173/new, right? Which is the actual route. But I can change this to new item and then say something like, what do we call the website? RRV7 CRUD. Just for us to have some nice SEO. I can do this, and now all of a sudden, you should see that the title of this page, of this route, changed. And this only applies for this specific route. If I were to go to the items, this one has a different title. Now, when we get to that page, we are going to add the metadata for that as well. Metadata is extremely important because, again, for SEO reasons, a lot of people have issues with normal React with Vite, and solutions like React Router v7 make it super easy for you to handle this. So what else can we add to this? We can add a little bit of a description for this page. A way to do this is to add an object with a name. We'll call it description. And we can add the content for this object. The content can be something like describing what this page does. Like you can create a new item using our Supabase CRUD app. Something like this. Obviously, we won't be able to test this, but you will see that this will be injected into the metadata that is injected over here. Perfect. Now we kind of finished all the logical part of this page. Let me just add the CSS so that this looks a little bit better, and I'll be back in a second. And this is it. I added all the CSS name, all of the class names, which by the way, you can access them again all in the description. And this is how it looks. You can stop and copy if you're interested in, but I basically just built this page over here. Very simple. Let's add a new item over here. What is a new item? A new video idea. I'll put like build a portfolio website. I mean, I'm probably not gonna make this as well because I already have a video on this, but the content would be design a personal portfolio to showcase projects, something like that. I'm gonna click on create item, and we should see that now it should be added to our database table. Perfect. Now let's deal with demonstrating and showing those items in the items page. How do we do that? So let's go to the items page component. So it's this route over here. Now, we currently just have a div being returned, but the important aspect of this page is that it needs to fetch data from our table and load that data into our UI. Now, if you just noticed the word that I used there, load, that's an important name because like I said, React Router v7 has this concept of special functions that you can use in your routes. And a special function that we've used so far is the action. This is more to mutate data, but a special function that needs to be used to load data is the loader function. And we definitely need one in this page so that we can fetch the data from Supabase. So I'm going to export an async function over here called loader. And in this loader function, I will request Supabase to return all the items from the table, and I will return that data. How do we do that? Well, I'm just going to say const is equal to await Supabase. Again, if you're not familiar with Supabase, to fetch data from the table is super simple. You just say .from, and then you specify the name of the table, so items, and then you put select all, select all the items. And we could order it based on the ID, but I don't think that that's necessary. This should be enough to return everything. And inside of here, we can get both the data that this returns and any errors that occur. And if there's any error, I want to return, again, the error message. So I'll say error.message. Now we could handle that if we want to, but below this, what we're going to do is at the end, when you have a loader function and you want to use the data that you're fetching from that loader function inside of your component to maybe display it in the UI like we want to, what you do is you return this data. So for example, I'll return here the data inside of this object, and then we can access that directly in the component. Now, how do we access that data inside of this component? Well, all of the route components in React Router v7, they have special props. So I'll actually access those props by accessing the type route. And you see there's three options over here of what the route I'm importing. The thing is, when you create a new route inside of your folder in the routes folder and you define it over here, React Router automatically creates this special type definition for your route. And it's individual for each specific route. Each route will have specific types. So choose the route for this specific page. In this case, we're in the items.tsx. So I'll choose the route for the items. So it will give us all the types for this specific route. So if we had params in this route, for example, it would automatically be integrated into this type. Now to access the component props, we just say component props over here, and it will give us access to the loader data. And the loader data is whatever is returned from the loader in this route. Great. Now, let's actually test to see if we can access this information by just console logging it. So I'm going to say console.log, and I'm going to console log the loader data.data because that's the option. But you saw that it already automatically gave us two options, either data or error, because it knows those are the only two things that we return. If I wanted to call this actually items and then pass the data over here, then this would automatically have items as an option. This might be actually better because data is kind of generic. But let's test to see if this works. I'm going to open up here my console log. I'm going to pull it over here. And yeah, you can see we are console logging the data from the table. Great. Now we want to display that data in our UI. So let's come down here. I want to return a div just like we are right now. I'm going to remove this. Now I want to put an h2 tag over here, which is going to be for the, I don't know, just to describe the items. So I'm going to say list of items. Then below this, let's actually render any errors that might have occurred on the way. So for example, if this actually returned as an error, then we can access this information. We'll destructure the error and the items from the loader data. And over here, we'll check, okay, if error is equal to true, then let's display that error. Let's say something like error.message. No, actually, error already is a message, so we'll just display the error. Great. Now below this, let's actually include, now over here, let's actually display the list of items. So I'm going to put an UL, unordered list, and we'll loop through the items by saying items.map. For each item, we're going to get over here, we're going to display a link. Now a link is similar to a nav link, but it's just a link that doesn't need to be in the navbar. And in this link, we want to have inside of it a list item, which is going to include a span with the title. So we can access the item.title just to display it. And we also want to display a little paragraph tag with a description. So we're going to say item.description. Now, why did we make this into a link? Well, because I want to be able to click on each of the items and go to an individual page for that item. We haven't created that page yet, but I want to do that so that we can, in that page, either delete or update the item if we want to. Now, for this link, if I want to do that, I'll have to put a to telling it where to navigate. Right now, we don't have that route yet, so I'll just put an empty slash, and let's see if it actually renders. So it seems like it does. We have here the titles and the descriptions for the two items that we created, and we can kind of click on them. Great. Now, let me add the UI for this page. The UI is going to be pretty simple, but I'll be back in a second. Perfect. As you can see, I just added here the class names for this page. One thing I also did that it was a mistake while I was coding is I obviously should have put the list item first in the list of items. I don't know how I didn't notice that, but I put the link first. But we want to put the list item first since this is an ordered list. And this is how the UI looks like. Very simple. But we just display the title and the description of each of the items. And now we want to implement the final thing, which is the ability to click on one of them and go to an individual page about that specific item where we're able to edit that item or delete it. Now to do that, we have to make a new page. And this new page is going to be called the item.tsx. So not items, just item. Now I'll create this page and then I'll come to our routes.ts file. And in here, I want to define a new route. And I do want it to be a route that will have a prefix. Now this prefix is going to be slash or items, just like this. It will be slash items. But then I also want to accept some parameter variables to be inserted into this path. So how we define params is by just simply adding the param name that we want to add. So I want to have individual pages that change depending on their ID. That's why we added the ID variable over here. Now I'll put the path, the actual root file path to this. It's just like we've been doing so far. It's just this, but then I have to put item.tsx. And again, the great thing is we added this ID thing over here. Because this is all like the type definitions for the routes are all created automatically by React Router. When I come to the item.tsx file, it will already have the specific type definition for that parameter that I added. Now, how do I access that? Well, let's first export the default function called item. And inside of there, let's just return a div for now. Now, inside of this, what we want to do is we want to fetch the information about a specific item based on its ID, right? Very simple to understand. Now, the way we fetch data, like we just went over, is through a loader. So let's create that loader. I'm going to export over here an async function called loader. And in here, we want to actually execute that. Now, when I mentioned to you guys that we have automatic type definition for the parameters, we can access them over here because this loader allows us to have access to a type called route.loader_args. But this type over here, we want to import from the specific page that we are in. So the item.tsx, because this means that it now knows that it has a params. And if you look at the params definition, see, it has an ID as already embedded into its type. Meaning that when I say const equals to params, I can destructure the ID directly. Perfect. Now inside of here, I want to first check, okay, if there's no ID, so if no ID, then I want to return an error that says something like no item found, something like that. But if there is an ID, then I want to grab the data and the error from Supabase. So I'll say Supabase, and remember we're getting the client from Supabase, and then we'll say dot from, we'll specify the items table, and we want to select all, similar to what we did before. And when I say all, it means all of the columns from this table, but we want to select all of the items in which there's an equation. Now the equation I'm talking about is I want the ID column in that item to be equal to the ID that was passed in the params. This will technically only return a single item, so we can specify that dot single at the end. Now over here, let's do the classic error check. We'll say if error, then we'll return an error with the error.message. And below this, I want to just return the item through the data. Perfect. Now inside of this function, we can access the loader data through the params or through the props over here by again passing the route, but we have to import the correct route. Yeah, I'll just do route dot component props. Now, oh, we already have route imported, so that's fine. Yeah, that's why it didn't appear. But yeah, we get the loader data, and this means that we can access through the loader data the item. So I'll say const equals to loader data, and we'll get back over here the item. Perfect. Now, what UI do we want to display? Well, the first thing in the UI we want to display is we want to put an h2 tag just saying edit item, because this is going to be a page where we can see the item as a whole, but we also can edit and delete it. Now, in order to edit an item, we have to have a form similar to what we had for the create item. This form will have a method of post, and inside of it, we want to have a very similar design as what we had with the new item, because we want to be able to edit every aspect of the page, right, of the item. So I'm going to copy everything and I'm going to paste it over here. So we're able to edit the title, we're able to edit the description or the content, and we're able to edit, and we'll have a button. But the button over here won't be for creating an item. It will be for updating an item. Now, the thing is, I also want to have another button which is going to be for deleting an item. So this is a different thing that I want you guys to understand. When you have two buttons that can submit a form, you can actually pass in a value to them. And this value will help us determine what intent we have with this submission. So when I pass a value, I can give a value of update on this one. And when I pass a value to this, I can give a value of delete. And when we deal with the submission, we'll be able to understand which action we're trying to take. Now, this is great. We also want to, if I go over here and we haven't been able to click on one of them. We didn't change the route for this. So let's actually do that. Let's go to the items page. On this link over here, we want to be able to, when you click on it, go to the specific page for this item. To do that, it's actually pretty simple. We know that the route for a specific item would be something like this: items/the ID. Now, to do that, we have to come over here and put /items/ID. We get the ID from the item over here. Now to inject some JavaScript, we had to change this into backticks and insert the JavaScript through this template of strings. So I'll say item.id, and when I click on this, now it should bring us to the ID of this item. Perfect. Now let's inject the information of this item directly into this inputs, so that if you want to just edit it, just change it with the default value already being there. The way I can do this is I can actually pass a default value to each input. And the default value to it will be the item.title, at least for the first one. And the default value for the text area will be the item.description. You'll see that now, by default, it will have this, but we can edit it if we want to, and then we'll be able to click the update and delete buttons if we want to as well. Perfect. Now, how do we actually update and delete it? Well, to do that, we need to have an action, similar to what we did with the new item over here. So I'm actually going to copy this action function. Obviously, it's going to be a bit different, but we want to copy it. And I want to paste it above here, but below the loader. Or it doesn't have to be below the loader. I just like putting the loader above. Now, we are going to keep this action function args. I need to import this. But not only in this case, we need the request, but we also want to have access to the ID. Because the ID is important to know which item we are deleting. When you have an action, it's similar to when you have a loader. This action function args allows you to access the params as well. So not only will get the request, but we'll also get the params. Now, from the request, we can get information like the title, and we can get information like the description. Even if it changed or not, it doesn't matter. We can get that. And we don't need to have this check over here because, to be honest, if you're trying to delete, it doesn't matter what you did with the title or the description. We'll just keep it like this. Now, before I do any insertion or anything I want to do with Supabase, we have to know what is the intent of this operation. Because remember, we can either delete or edit. Now, to do that, we added a value to the buttons. But a value is fine, but it's not enough for it to get what that value is from the form data. To be able to access something in this form data variable over here, when we say something like get title or get description, we're accessing the name of the input, not the value. So what we have to do is we have to give a name to both of these inputs that is going to be the same, and it's going to help us to access that information. So what we do is we're going to give a name. We're going to call it intent. So what is the intent with this submission? Is it to delete or is it to update? We're going to give the same value to both. And then up here in the action, we can get the intent directly by saying const intent equals to, and I wrote this wrong, equals to form data dot get, and we can get the intent. Now, this value over here will either be delete or update, meaning that we can write a conditional here. If intent, why am I writing intent so wrong? Did I even write it correctly down there? Yeah, I did. So intent, delete, or update. So in our action over here, I'm going to check. If intent is equal to delete, then we'll operate in a way. But else if intent is equal to update, so update, we'll do something else. In the end, if none of them are true, we're just going to return an empty object. Now let's deal with the delete first, because it's the easiest one. Now for the delete, we're going to copy this Supabase action over here. We're going to uncomment it. And to delete an item from a table, you access the table like this by saying from items. And then you just call the delete function. Now you do have to specify which item you want to delete. And the item we want to delete is the item where the ID column is equal to the ID that we get from the params. Now we can access that by saying params.id. Perfect. And we might get an error from this. If there's an error, we want to return the error equals to error.message. If nothing happens, it will continue forward and it will just return nothing, which is fine because it means that we deleted this item. And we can actually redirect if we want to as well. We can redirect to the home page as well. Perfect. Now for updating, it's a bit different. We have the title, we have the description. So what we can do is we can copy this logic over here. We can paste it over here. And instead of deleting, we want to update. Now with the update, we have to pass the data we want to update. And the data is the title and the description. We still want to maintain this logic because we want to update the item with the ID equal to the params.id. And we'll also keep the error handling in case that happens. And in the end, we're going to redirect to the home page. Perfect. Now, the reason why we're redirecting here is if there's an error, we're not going to reach this point. We're just going to return the error and we can handle that down below. But if we succeed, we are going to be redirected. Now we can test this. We're going to come over here. Let's refresh this. You see the default value will be this. If I want to change this to say, build a responsive portfolio website and click update, you should see that it should redirect us, but it didn't. So let me see why. Oh, it seemed like it did work. Yeah, it seemed like it did work, but it just didn't redirect. Let's check to see why. Oh yeah, we have to return the redirect, not just redirect. So let's return this. Let's come back over here. If I want to now change this as well to say projects and experience, I don't know, click update. It should redirect us to the homepage with the new description. Great. This works with the other one as well. Let's change this to build a cool weather app. You see it does update it perfectly. Now, what if I want to delete it? Let's actually just create one to delete because I like those other ones. I'll just put a random title over here and random description to not waste time. We'll create this item. Now I want to delete it. I can just click on delete item and you see it did work. It deleted it from our table. It didn't even give us time to see the item appearing on this table and it worked. Perfect. Now, we're pretty much done with most of this. I'm going to add the CSS for this, and I'll be back in a second for us to add the remaining metadata for this project. And perfect. As you can see, we added here the class names for everything, but I remembered I wanted to do something that I did for the demo project, which is I want to add a display of the error and also a display of if the item was actually updated successfully. I remember that when I updated an item, I actually don't redirect it. That's how I did it before recording this video. So I do want to remove this. And what I want to do is I want to return a status of whether or not this item was successfully updated or not, in case you want to continue updating more. The way for us to do this is if it was successful in the update section over here, we can return a Boolean that says that updated is equal to true. If this happens, then in this loader data over here, we can now access error and also updated as an option. Actually, no, not from loader data. Error is from loader data because you see there's an error in the loader data, but we can also access the action data. That's something I haven't taught you guys. We can access the action data. Now, through the action data, we can get both the error and the updated, as you can see over here. But the problem is that now from the action data, what we can do is we can actually come down here somewhere. I'm going to put it above the form. And I can do something like this. I can say if action data dot updated is equal to true, then I want to display a div that will say something like, and let me close the div. It will say something like item updated successfully. And I want to put some class names to this. Since it's very small class names, I'm not even going to cut myself to doing that. I just want to add a background to be green to 100. I want to make the text be green 800. I'll put a padding of 2 and a margin bottom of 4. And I'll make the thing be rounded. So what will happen is now if I update this by saying something like responsive personal portfolio, this should show up at the top and it shouldn't actually redirect. If I refresh this, that disappears. This is great. Also, if you guys want to handle errors I mean, it's not that big of a deal, but if you want to handle errors here, you can also add an error for this and change this to like, I don't know, maybe the action data dot error, and maybe change this to like red and this to red as well. Let's actually force an error. I think that's a good idea. Let me, what could force an error? I know what could force an error. This is just for, the video is pretty much over. If you guys are interested in seeing this, I could force an error by changing this to a different name, right? And then if I click on this, it should actually give an error message. See, and this is how the error message would be displayed. If you want to specify the error message, you could do that as well, because if a user sees this, they would be like, what the, you know, like they would be confused, but we'll keep it like that and it should be good to go. Perfect. Now, the last thing we want to do is just add the metadata, which is important like we did previously. I'm going to go to the new item page and let's copy this and let's add it to both the item page and to the items page. So for the metadata on this page, we're just going to say edit item for the title. Also, one cool thing with the metadata function is that you also have access to all of these arguments that you have over here. If you say like route and you import the route that is for this page and you say .meta args, you have access to the params and you can make the metadata for the title for this page be dynamic depending on that param. For example, let's I know this won't be that useful, but if I wanted to say edit item and then just insert the idea of the item over here like this, then you'll see that when I go to an item, the page title now includes the ID of that item and it adapts accordingly. Perfect. Now the description for this, we're just going to say edit or delete an item using our application. Perfect. Now let me copy this and let's go to the items page. And over here, we can do the same thing, but I'm not going to put any params to this. And I'm going to remove this. For this, it will literally just say all your items. And here it will say something like manage your items, view, create, and update items. Perfect. The reason I'm showing this to you guys is because this is all part of an integral part of working on a project using React Router v7. And I've made 2 videos already using React Router v7. It's a framework that no one is making videos on just because it's so new. So I do want to be one of the first ones to show you guys how important it's going to be in the future. I don't agree with the way they released this, how they merged Remix with React Router and made everything super confusing. The docs is abysmal in my opinion. So I hope I actually helped you guys understand how to structure your project using this. I know this is a simple project. I'm hoping on, depending on the performance of this video and depending on the feedback that I get from you guys, I'm planning on actually building like a real big, large project only using React Router version 7. But I wanted to show you guys because this is a good example of how to deal with metadata, how to deal with actions, how to deal with loaders, and so on. So if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like down below and comment what you want to see next. Subscribe because I'm posting every week with very insightful videos and I'll massively appreciate it. If you want to sign up for my newsletter, there's going to be a link in the description. I'm going to release my full React course from beginner to advanced and I'm really excited for that. It's my first fully owned React course that I'm releasing, so I'm spending a lot of time into it. If you want to get discounts or get just a notification when I release it, sign up for my newsletter. It's going to be at PedroTech.co/newsletter. So thank you so much for watching and I see you guys next time.